The little boy leaned toward his father and murmured something that would leave a lasting mark on both their lives and the lives of two strangers. "Dad, they haven't eaten." His father glanced up from his stack of pancakes, expecting to see a dropped fork or a spilled glass of milk, but instead his gaze landed on a mother and her daughter seated quietly near the window, both pretending not to feel the ache of hunger. The mother kept her eyes fixed on the menu, never turning a single page, while the little girl followed every plate that passed their table with an unspoken longing. What transpired next would stun every person inside that small diner. If heartfelt stories of kindness, family bonds, and unexpected second chances resonate with you, please take a moment to hit like and subscribe to the channel, because this tale is just beginning to unfold. It was a bright Saturday morning when Daniel, a hardworking single father, walked into the Maple Corner diner with his 8-year-old son, Noah. Daniel had come to treasure these unhurried mornings since his wife left. They had become a ritual, a sliver of peace in a life filled with long hours and mounting bills. They settled into their favorite wooden booth by the window, where warm sunlight streamed across the table as plates of scrambled eggs, toast, bacon, and pancakes filled the space between them. Daniel repaired heating systems across town, and though the pay was never quite enough, he made certain that Noah never sensed the weight of their financial worries. That morning, Noah was meticulously slicing his pancakes into little squares when his attention drifted toward another booth across the room. A woman sat there with a young girl who looked about 7 years old. The mother wore a faded gray sweater and had pulled her dark hair into a loose ponytail, while her daughter, dressed in a pink shirt, clutched a glass of water with both small hands. Something about their table felt off. There was no coffee, no plates, no food at all, just 2 glasses of water and a menu that lay untouched between them. "Dad," Noah whispered, his voice barely audible above the clatter of dishes. Daniel looked up from his breakfast. "They haven't eaten." Daniel turned his head toward the booth once more. The mother caught his gaze and immediately looked away, offering her daughter a tight smile as if to say everything was fine. She gently pushed the menu toward the little girl, murmuring something about ordering later, but the girl simply nodded, her eyes still fixed on a plate of golden pancakes carried past their table. Daniel felt a tight knot form in his chest. He recognized that look, that hollow stare. He had seen it once in Noah's eyes during a cruel winter when his own paycheck had been delayed and their refrigerator stood nearly empty. Hunger, he knew, did not always announce itself with tears. Sometimes it sat quietly behind a brave smile. "Dad," Noah repeated softly, "can we give them some of ours?" Daniel looked at his son, searching his face for any hesitation. He found none. "Yes," he said firmly, "we can." He reached for the menu and began to rise from his seat, but before he could take a single step, the waitress approached the woman's table and spoke a few words that drained the color from the mother's cheeks. The mother reached into her purse with trembling hands and pulled out a few crumpled bills, counting them twice before lowering her eyes in defeat. The little girl leaned closer to her mother and whispered, "Mom, it's okay. I'm not hungry." Daniel heard those words clearly from across the room, and they struck him with unexpected force. Noah heard them too. Without a word, he pushed his own plate toward his father and said, "Take mine first, Dad." Daniel swallowed hard, fighting the emotion rising in his throat, then walked directly toward the woman's table. He already understood that the waitress was holding a small folded bill, and from the expression on the mother's face, he realized this family's troubles ran far deeper than an empty breakfast plate. As Daniel approached the booth, the waitress quietly stepped aside. The woman quickly folded the few bills she held and slipped them back into her purse, her voice barely a whisper as she said, "I'm sorry. We'll leave." Her daughter immediately dropped her head, embarrassed though she had done nothing wrong. Daniel felt his heart sink. "Please," he said gently, "you don't have to go." The woman looked up at him with cautious eyes. "We're fine." Daniel glanced at the untouched menu and then at the little girl. "My son noticed you haven't eaten." The mother's gaze moved toward Noah, who stood a few feet away, clutching his half-eaten pancake. For just a moment, her composure cracked. "Your son is very kind," she whispered. Daniel smiled softly. "He gets that from somewhere else." "I'm just trying to keep up with him." The little girl offered the smallest hint of a smile. Daniel pulled out a chair but did not sit down. "Would you mind if I ordered breakfast for you both?" The woman shook her head immediately. "No, we can't accept that." "It's not charity," Daniel replied. "It's breakfast. My son has already decided we're sharing." Noah nodded with serious determination. "We have too much anyway." Daniel looked at his son, knowing full well they had no leftovers to spare, but he admired Noah's resolve. The mother finally turned to her daughter. "Mia," she whispered, "what would you like?" The girl hesitated for a long moment before answering. "Pancakes." The word escaped like a confession. Daniel smiled warmly. 2 orders of pancakes coming up. He raised his hand to signal the waitress. But as the waitress walked away, Daniel noticed something that shifted his expression entirely. The mother had an envelope sitting beside her purse, thick and creased, stamped with red lettering. He did not ask about it, choosing instead to return to his own booth and slide in next to Noah. "Dad," Noah whispered, "why was she going to leave?" Daniel looked back at the woman. "Sometimes people leave because they're afraid someone will see how much they're struggling." Noah pondered that for a moment. "But if someone sees, maybe they can help." Daniel smiled gently. "Exactly." A few minutes later, 2 plates of steaming pancakes arrived at the woman's table. Mia stared at them as though they were made of gold. Her mother gently pushed the plate toward her and said, "Go ahead." Mia took a single bite, then another, and suddenly tears welled in her eyes. Her mother reached over and brushed them away. Daniel looked down at his own plate, pretending not to see, but Noah missed nothing. "Dad," he whispered, "she's crying." "Sometimes people cry when they finally feel safe," Daniel replied quietly. The mother heard him. She looked across the room and offered him a grateful, tearful smile. After Mia had eaten several bites, the woman finally introduced herself as Sarah. She had been raising Mia alone since her husband passed away 2 years earlier. Daniel listened as Sarah explained that she had recently lost her job at a small clothing store when the business closed its doors. She had applied everywhere, but every interview ended with the same hollow promise: "We'll call you." Her savings had vanished, consumed by rent, utilities, and medicine for Mia. That morning she had brought her last few dollars to the diner because Mia had begged for pancakes. But when Sarah counted the money, she realized she could not afford even a single meal for both of them. She had decided they would simply go home hungry. Daniel glanced at the envelope beside her purse. Sarah followed his eyes and picked it up slowly. "That," she said quietly, "is an eviction notice." The room seemed to grow silent. Noah stopped eating. Sarah stared down at the envelope and whispered, "We have 3 days." Daniel looked at his son. Noah looked back at him with the same innocent expression from earlier. Then Noah leaned close and whispered, "Dad, can we help them go home?" Daniel took a slow, deep breath. He had planned to spend that Saturday fixing a broken fence, paying bills, and stretching his own money until payday. But now he understood that something far greater had brought them all to this diner. Daniel reached into his wallet, pulled out his phone, and said something that made Sarah stare at him in disbelief. "I might know someone who can give you a job." Sarah's eyes widened. "You don't even know me." Daniel smiled. "Neither did you know my son this morning." He looked at Noah. But sometimes a stranger sees what everyone else walks past. What Daniel did not yet know was that Sarah's next words would reveal a connection to his own past, a connection that would make him question whether their meeting was truly coincidence. Sarah stared at Daniel for several seconds before finally speaking. "The person you said might have a job, what kind of work is it?" Daniel smiled reassuringly. "My friend owns a small property maintenance company. They need someone reliable to help with scheduling, customer calls, and paperwork. You said you worked at a clothing store, so you probably know how to deal with people." Sarah looked down at Mia and then back at Daniel. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything yet," Daniel replied. "Just take the number." Sarah accepted the piece of paper with trembling fingers. Mia continued eating her pancakes, and for the first time that morning, her small face looked peaceful. But Sarah suddenly grew emotional. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Daniel paused. "Because my son noticed." Sarah turned to Noah. "Thank you," she whispered. Noah smiled shyly. "You're welcome." Then Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a small photograph. "There's something else you should know." She placed the photograph on the table. Daniel looked at it and felt the blood drain from his face. It showed a younger man standing beside a construction truck, a man he recognized immediately. It was his older brother Michael, who had died several years earlier. "Where did you get this?" Daniel managed. Sarah asked softly, "You knew Michael?" Daniel stared at the photograph. "He was my brother." Sarah covered her mouth in shock. "Oh my God!" Daniel leaned closer. "How did you know him?" Sarah explained that before Michael died, he had worked at the same property company where she had once been employed. Michael had been the one who recommended her for that job. More importantly, he had helped her during one of the hardest moments of her life. When Sarah was pregnant with Mia and struggling to pay rent, Michael had quietly left an envelope of money at her doorstep. She had never known who sent it until later. "He told me never to mention it," Sarah said through tears. "He said helping someone wasn't supposed to be a story about himself." Daniel lowered his eyes. His brother had always been that way, quiet and generous, never seeking recognition. Daniel suddenly understood why Sarah's face had seemed familiar. He had glimpsed her once years earlier at Michael's funeral, but neither of them had spoken. The two families had crossed paths long before this breakfast without ever knowing it. Noah looked between them. Dad, is she Uncle Michael's friend? Daniel nodded. Yes, buddy, Noah smiled. Then maybe that's why we found them. Sarah began crying openly, no longer trying to hide it. Daniel reached across the table and gently said, My brother helped you once. Maybe today I can continue what he started. Sarah shook her head. I can't let you pay my rent. I'm not paying it forever, Daniel replied. I'm helping you get back on your feet. He called his friend, explained Sarah's situation, and within minutes she had an interview scheduled for Monday morning. Daniel also quietly contacted the diner owner and paid for Sarah and Mia's meal. Before leaving, he slipped the eviction notice into his pocket. What are you doing? Sarah asked. Nothing you need to worry about tonight, he said. Later that afternoon, Daniel drove home with Noah. The truck cab was quiet for several minutes. Finally, Noah asked, Dad, did we help them? Daniel smiled. Yes, buddy, we did. Noah looked out the window. Good. Daniel reached over and squeezed his son's shoulder. You know something. I thought I was teaching you how to be a good person, but maybe you're teaching me. Monday came and Sarah got the job. Over the following weeks, she worked diligently, paid what she could, and slowly rebuilt her life. Daniel never treated her like someone he had rescued. He treated her like a friend. Mia and Noah became inseparable, and Saturday breakfasts at the diner became a cherished new family tradition. Months later, Sarah finally handed Daniel an envelope. Inside was the exact amount he had secretly used to prevent her eviction. I promised myself I'd return it, she said. Daniel tried to refuse, but Sarah shook her head. You didn't just help us survive, you reminded us that kindness still exists. Daniel looked at Noah, who was sitting beside Mia, laughing over a stack of pancakes. He smiled and accepted the envelope. Then he said, I think my brother would be proud. Sarah smiled through tears. From that day forward, whenever Noah noticed someone sitting alone, he would quietly ask his father the same question. Dad, do you think they need someone? Daniel would always look around, smile, and answer, Let's find out. Because sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change a person's entire life. And sometimes, a child who simply notices another's hunger can remind an entire family what compassion truly means. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories about kindness, family, and second chances. You never know when one small act of kindness might become the reason someone believes in hope again.